Okay, guys, this is it. We're gonna get into the patch notes here. You know the drill. For those of you guys who don't know, I've been feeling a little not great about some of the balance things lately. So we're going to find out how this has gone down. All right. So this is the big balance update. It's pretty large. It's not huge, but they've changed a lot of stuff, you know. And the big patch, I really like a lot of the concepts behind the big patch. But after playing it for a while, you know, obviously some things need tweaks. I think it's pretty obvious that the jail system needs some kind of tweaks. The Underlords themselves feel a bit imbalanced. So let's go ahead and dive into these patch notes and see how things are different, okay? I'm probably gonna start playing this game a bit more, at least like, I mean, I'll play it tomorrow. I have like a tournament. Let's see, okay. Because I know a lot of people have noticed I haven't played it for a few days. And, you know, I just want to say, you know, we'll see how this goes. Okay, let's actually get into this. I'm stalling. Fix middle mouse button, camera, minor things. At the top is always kind of the most boring things. Added a mini jail to hover in the shop to quickly show the jailed heroes. Okay, makes sense. Updated duos wanted posters. Sure. UI improvements. Nothing really happening there. Alright. It's not like these are unimportant per se, it's just there's not much to comment on, you know. It's like, you like it, these are good bug fixes, they're good UI changes, you know, it's not like, there's no controversy, right? Gameplay, fire is now lethal if the applier is an enemy. So that's a pretty big change. Hobgon's fire, I believe, was, correct me if I'm mistaken, a total of 2.5% of max HP per second. Yeah, that's correct. And it was not lethal before, which is a really, really big deal. When you go down to, you know, 1 HP, you don't die from the fire. Well, now you do, as long as the source of the fire was an enemy. Friendly fire, like, you know, when Hobgon sets his own teammates on fire, is non-lethal, apparently, which is pretty interesting. But enemies can get killed by fire. So that's obviously a buff to Hobgon. Okay. Fixed the bug where knights would not get their bonus magical damage reduction when standing next to friendly knights. Yeah, so this has been a bug for a couple of weeks now. Knights have felt really, really bad. Like, really, really bad. And now, suddenly, you know, they feel a bit better, I guess. This has been a bug that has devastated them. And we see break no longer affects alliances. So at a certain point in the past, they took the break effect, which only Doom in the game, Doom's ability, Doom, had the ability to apply, and made it disable alliance effects. It was a cute way of making him, I guess, a counter to Bronny's or something. And then they added independent break sources into the game, mostly via ANESSIX's various talents. And the ability for break to disable alliances was pretty broken, if you'll pardon the pun. Break change is big? Yes. Break change is meta defining. Because for a while, I mean, break was pretty necessary. Like, auto pick ANESSIX, auto pick, like, the break talents, just disable alliances. It was pretty dumb. It was, you know, effectively like a full silence, almost, you know. And it basically just stopped a lot of things from working. It was a little too powerful. And you'll find that something that's kind of interesting, something that's important to understand is, like, this is a buff to certain heroes that are very vulnerable to break. Like, for example, the one time I tried playing Knights in the last, like, week or so, you know, I had a pretty good game, and then my Luna, you know, we encountered a break, and my Luna stopped having her glaives work. And it turns out Luna without glaives means your Knight's comp is useless. And you might say, well, swim, but break still affects glaives, so that doesn't really make sense. And the thing to understand is, if break is weaker, fewer people are picking break, so there's going to be less break, so the things that break affects that aren't alliances are also going to be better because of this, right? So that's really important to understand. If break is weaker, people are maybe picking Hobgon instead of ANESSIX, maybe picking her other talents instead of this. So, I mean, break's play rate will drop. We don't know necessarily by how much. But it will go down a pretty significant amount, which means anything at all that break counters is going to be able to be more playable. That's a really, really big deal. I would wager I haven't seen the rest of the changes, but this is probably the single biggest line in this entire patch notes, right? So break sources. So what were the big break sources? There were ANESSIX had like 3 different talents that broke things. There was Nyx Assassin that added break, and Shadow Demon. Is that basically it? Yeah. So a huge change between these. You know, we might see Hobgen start to see a bit more play rate. We're not necessarily certain. What a world we live in. Everything isn't broken anymore. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Hero changes. ANESSIX. Hero changes. This isn't a hero. Why would you list this under... Whatever. Sorry, I'm being pedantic. Martyr's Boon no longer has a burst heal component. Instead, it heals over time. And the heal per second changed from 5 to 10 per Underlord's level. So, quite interesting. Basically, this... I mean, it's effectively the same amount. I believe... It might be a little different. But I believe it was the same amount. Like, half of it was burst and half of it was regen, right? And they just, like, took away the burst and doubled the regen. 75 HP per level versus 80 HP per level now. All right. So it's a little bit more now, right? Yeah. It is actually a little bit more healing now, but instead of being burst, you know, over the 8 seconds, you're going to see, like, some of your units are dying. So effectively, it is worse without, like, the burst heal. Like, some of your units will die during the buff. So definitely a bit of a nerf. It makes it kind of more reliant on the kinds of units that won't get bursted themselves. Basically, she and Martyr's Boon are just a little bit worse here, right? All right, Rejuvenating Ritual replaces Arcane Ritual. Now reads Martyr's Boon now delivers the first 50% of the heal immediately and the rest over the duration of the spell. So Arcane Ritual was ANESSIX's round 10 talent that some mages were picking. That was the one that, you know, had the mana gain whole thing. And it was kind of like, it was a little clunky. Most people weren't picking it. And even in a lot of cases, like mages, you're getting the Martyr's Boon a little too slowly, to the point where, like, half your units have already casted their spells by the time you're getting Martyr's Boon out. So they kind of deleted the old Arcane Ritual. It makes a lot of sense. And now her round 10 talent is this thing, which gives her, you know, the front-loaded first half. And that's very pickable. Look, they changed the icon as well. Very, very pickable. So it was 80 per level. Sorry. All right, 80 per level. So let's say you've got like a level, let's just say 8. It's easy. 8 ANESSIX. You know, obviously you're dealing 640 regen during the full buff over 8 seconds. So 640 regen over 8 seconds. And now it's going to be 320 immediately. And then the other 320 over the 8 seconds, right? No design changes for Resident Sleeper. Need more health in duos. 100 shared health isn't enough. I agree with that. Let's keep reading and see what's going on, because duos is a much faster format. So yeah, regarding like the Rejuvenating Ritual, the question is like, how good is this? Is this pickable over Chaotic Hunter? I don't know. I haven't played the game for a few days, so I mean, unless maybe I missed a crazy meta shift where everyone started picking End of Medicine or Brill Bruiser. Which in theory are very powerful, but have really, really big downsides. Rejuvenating Ritual, basically the logic behind it. So like, let's say your unit dies within the first, 3 quarters? Because the thing is, if it's 640, then 320 is applied right away. And then when you're at the halfway mark of the new one, you're going to be at the, what is that, is that 480? Yeah, 480. If you're at the halfway mark of the new one, you're at 480, whereas the halfway mark of the old one is that 320. So if you die in the first like 75% of the new one, that's effectively like the same amount of health as... No, sorry. If you die within... Hang on. I'm having a mathematical issue. If you die within the first half of the first one, that's Or sorry, not the first one. So there's two changes happening here, which is why it's a little confusing. If you die within the first half of not taking Rejuvenating Ritual, then you've lost out. Let's say you die exactly halfway through, you lose like 320 health. If you die halfway through after taking Rejuvenating Ritual, you're losing out on 160 health. You're losing out on half as much health, right? That's pretty good. I do feel like that actually is probably better than Chaotic Hunter. It's hard to say. I mean, people are definitely going to try out both, but I do imagine Rejuvenating Ritual is going to be like near auto pick. It does seem like mathematically it just will end up doing a lot more than the Hunter. Okay, Instant Regret, duration changed from infinite to 5 seconds. So this is the break thing, another nerf to break. They're kind of double nerfing it in this. Instant Regret was one. I don't know if it was like commonly chosen. A lot of people were taking Exploit Weakness over Instant Regret. But now that Martyrs Boon lasts, the 8 seconds again, now this feels a lot harder to take. The Companion is still, this is gonna, if you want break. Not sure how valuable break is right now. The Companion is going to be what you want. It feels like now that break doesn't disable alliances, it feels like it just doesn't do too much. Because alliances were the big thing, right? Now it's going to be disabling, passives? And that's basically it. So I don't think you take Exploit Weakness anymore. It looks like Phantom Pain might actually be a pick now that the 2 breaks got kind of nerfed. Okay. So let's continue on. Arc Warden, Tempest Double. Here we go. This is the nerf we've all been waiting for. Clones have a minus 50% debuff to their attack damage. Wow, look at that. Okay, so if you guys watched my patch notes review, you know that for the past 3 months basically, even more than that, Arc Warden has been kind of a meme in these, because they'll I mean, the one time he was OP, if you guys remember way back, 4 or 5 months ago, he was kind of he was sort of OP, and then they didn't really nerf him. They actually made him stronger by changing him. They reworked him into an even stronger unit. And then since then, they've had a couple extremely half-hearted nerfs to this unit, basically. Extremely half-hearted nerfs. They have given him minus 100 health and then the 3-second cooldown, which are both kind of memes. And when I saw them on the patch reviews, I basically did just laugh. So now we've got the clone deals a bit less damage. Attack damage, specifically. So, how big of a change is this? I mean, I can tell you this hero is still good. Because obviously you just slap a Maelstrom, or even a Skullbasher is still going to be fine on him. Let's go ahead and have a look at his actual DPS. So the level 2 Arc Warden has 160 DPS. Of course, that's redoubled to 320. And now, a level 2 Arc Warden, now that his clone is only doing half of that, is going to be dealing 240. So immediately, you're down an entire 80 DPS. 80 DPS. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. That's a quarter of your natural DPS. I won't lie, this is a bigger nerf than the other two, for sure. It is a bigger nerf than the other two. This hero, I don't think feels super OP anymore, personally. He's still good, don't get me wrong. You can still put Maelstrom on him. Keep in mind, this is just attack damage. This is not Maelstrom damage. And, I mean, the Skull Basher is still going to be dealing a lot of damage that won't get reduced by this as well, right? So this hero is not what I would call dead, but you will feel this nerf. For sure. It's you can't go super out of your way to pick this hero every single time. It's still going to be something that, you're probably very happy to see a level 2 of, fairly early, and that's still going to do a ton of good for you. And I think I would have preferred a nerf that was, maybe a bit more extreme, but he still is floating some pretty relevant tags. And the attack damage is definitely pretty major for him. I wouldn't have minded just an attack speed nerf. I think that would have made a lot more sense. Just because attack speed is kind of the entire mechanism that causes Arc Warden to be sort of OP with, stuff like Maelstrom and Skullbasher anyway. But yeah, I mean, this is a healthy change overall. Axe max HP got increased. They were like, well, 1610, 3220, these numbers aren't fucking weird enough. Let's make it 1851, which I can only surmise is somebody's favorite year. Maybe there was a historical event. Like, what the? I don't know. Does anyone else remember where because I talked about this like once before, where in early Yu-Gi-Oh they printed a couple cards that just had like weird ass numbers for no reason, like the Pumpkin, the King of Pumpkins, the Grim Reaper, and like the Castle of Darkness. For some reason, a couple of units in Yu-Gi-Oh just had like weird ass like attack and defense numbers, and this is kind of reminding me of that. Like, I understand it's a 15% increase, but this is still really strange. I don't know, man. OCD people? Yeah. People are getting trolled hardcore. But anyway, I mean, it's a bit of a buff to Axe. Like, Axe is becoming properly tanky these days. He's starting to rival Pudge. I remember last time when they buffed Axe level 2's armor and Axe level 3's armor, I went through and I calculated the EHP of Pudge 2 versus Axe 2. And unfortunately, Pudge 2 still won by a lot. But now he's got a second buff. Suddenly, you know, Axe is looking pretty good. Maybe at the end of this, I want to see like how Pudge got changed, if Pudge got changed like lower near the bottom. But we'll compare Axe 2 to Pudge 2 EHP when we see that change. Okay, Bloodseeker lost 5 armor. All right, interesting. Maximum health up 200 base. Blood Rage, instead of reaching maximum attack rate at 20% health, he reaches maximum attack speed at 25, 30, and 35% health. Okay, that's pretty interesting. So Bloodseeker gets more max HP and less armor. Max HP for the most part. So the question is, you know, EHP is probably going to go a bit down from this. The 400 HP is going to be doing less than the 5 armor. So Bloodseeker's EHP is down. The question is, does Bloodseeker benefit from more max HP or not? He loses health faster with more max HP because his damage taken is percentage driven. But he gains more health with more max HP because his kill is more damage driven. The question is, how many kills per second on average is he getting? Because 7% compared to 35% means obviously you're going to be needing to be getting a kill every 5 seconds for max health to be positive for him. This feels like a nerf. I mean, like, getting a bit more attack speed faster is important. I think at higher levels, like at level 3, this probably has to be a buff. For sure. Like, Blood Rage does feel better for sure. Like, having like a better threshold for hitting those attack speed markers you want. But 5 armor, losing 5 armor is a really big deal. And it's definitely a bigger deal than gaining this 200 health, no matter how you swing it. I have to say this is a buff overall. Like, level 3 Bloodseeker probably feels a lot more scary now. It makes him scale a bit more as a unit. I will say this was a pretty weak unit, so I don't think this is the change he needs per se. This isn't the nerf. It's unfair to call this a nerf. This part up here feels a bit kind of counterproductive. Like, he's a very weak hero. They buffed him in this way down here, and then it seems like they... I mean, I don't get why he has 0 armor now. It feels like they're just kind of like rebalancing that, because I don't... This isn't the kind of hero that's like, you know, on the verge of being too OP. It is high variance, and you don't want a hero like this to be super strong. He's kind of designed to be weak. That's kind of his whole point. He's like a sort of weak, risky hero. But at the same time, I don't think... I mean, his tags alone are very weak right now. I don't know if he needed the -5 armor. Hobgin, Explosivo, animation length changed from 4 to 2.4 seconds. That's a big deal. Very big deal, obviously. I mean, basically cut of time. And Hobgin's animations, as we all know, are kind of his biggest problem. So, ANESSIX is getting nerfed. Hobgin is getting buffed again. We could be at the point where Hobgin could actually start becoming unironic. I remember last week... Man, last week's Hobgin buffs were actually really sad. You know? Because last week... Hobgin's, you know, he got buffed in his animations, and ANESSIX got a bit nerfed. And then I remember literally like playing all day the day after the patch, and I still didn't see a single Hobgen. I didn't even see one. I'm not even saying Hobgen had a low win rate. I literally still didn't even see one after last time. So I mean, again, we're seeing Hobgen buffs, and that really speaks to how insanely imbalanced they were when they launched. But we're seeing Hobgen's buffs a bit more. You know, Let's Go Crazy happens a bit faster, and silences Hobgen, which some people were calling for. I mean, Let's Go Crazy, kind of the problem with it is he still just like spends all this channel time on these long animations that don't make sense. And his attack range increases to 8, which is the full board. 8. Am I dumb? Isn't attack range the amount of tiles away from you that you can attack? What did it show attack range? Attack range 4. Isn't 8 more than you need? Wouldn't 7 cover the entire board from corner to corner? Or am I dumb? Because an attack range of 4 is 4 tiles away from you. It doesn't matter. I'm just like, I thought attack range meant how many cells, like starting at 1 away from you. It doesn't matter. Basically, when Hobgen has LGC on him, he can hit the entire board. Fire Break. Damage reduction changed from 25% to 45%. Which one's Fire Break? I don't know Hobgen's abilities by name. Wait a second.
Hello there.
That's his, is that his new one? No. Fire Break, this one. Oh, right. The supercharged units damage reduction one. Okay. I mean, all of a sudden, I guess this could be a bit better. It's still, I don't know if you can choose that over some like Burnout though.
I'm sure we can work.
I do need to kind of like look through the rest of him after all this. ANESSIX changes were fairly straightforward. Like for the most part, you're a bit more so avoiding the ones with break. Maybe Phantom Pain can find a place. I like the new Rejuvenating Ritual, but it's possible Chaotic Hunter is still better. Hobgens, we're gonna have to like kind of read through the rest of them. Let's read through Feedback Loop before we decide what we want. Does that damage reduction also reduce the damage from the fire? So I would assume not, because fire damage is pure damage. But we'd have to test that. So Feedback Loop. With the new changes to Let's Go Crazy, we have brought back the old Feedback Loop. Okay. So we're back to the Feedback Loop from 2 weeks ago. Supercharged units gain mana from damage caused by abilities. So this one's still only useful for Tinker. Okay. Huh. That's interesting. I mean, this ability kind of got changed because it didn't really do anything in its old form, right? So you can only take this with Tinker, right? Because otherwise it's not really doing anything. I had a Tinker with Supercharged against me, not fun. Yeah. Health loss isn't getting damaged. Yeah. The damage reduction shouldn't reduce on fire effect. So yeah, Feedback Loop goes back to being kind of fairly unpickable, like meme combo with Tinker, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to comment on Hobgen since I've spent like, you know, the full like week and a half of playing this patch playing ANESSIX, you know, as everyone else did. So I don't know. I'll definitely give Hobgen a try. We'll have to see. I mean, the animation and length of Explosivo is kind of nice. I kind of suspect Hobgen still might not be good enough. I don't know. I mean, there's not a ton here that I think. I mean, the biggest thing is the buff to LGC, I guess. Explosivo animation length is a big deal too. It's a very, very big deal. But LGC builds, again, make a bit more sense now, especially after like last week's increment as well. So you can basically take, there's kind of like 2 trees in Hobgen. The LGC build is going to go like Burnout, probably into like Hot Rod, into LGC. And then like last week, I guess you were taking Feedback Loop, and now this week again you're not. And now you go into Armor and keep it secret again. I don't know. It's kind of weird that they just changed it back. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, we can see that got buffed a bit just because LGC silences you. But honestly, with Explosivo having kind of like a short animation length, I mean, does he even like? If his animation length of Explosiva is shorter, like you might not necessarily even like want to silence you. Because now, you know, it comes at the cost of not being able to cast your other spell, which you might not necessarily want. Lethal damage from fire now. Yeah, the lethal damage from fire now, which I don't know exactly how big of a deal that is. Again, you know, I would have to defer to the wisdom of someone who spent a lot of time playing Hobgin. I'll definitely try him out for sure, but I am nowhere near an expert to be able to, like, you know, comment on how big of a deal these are. I'm not a Hobgin picker. It's definitely at least very noticeable. We got Lifestealer down here. I know there's been some Lifestealer memes recently. I know there was one day where you guys were able to successfully tilt me into having a debate about why Lifestealer is bad. I'm not gonna lie. I did get a little triggered. 34 DPS? Yeah. I mean, the unit had 34 DPS. I pulled up on stream, he had less DPS than Shadow Shaman. Less DPS than Shadow Shaman. One more time, less DPS than Shadow Shaman. And now let's look at what they did here. Okay, attack rate changed from 0.588 to 0.667. Wow. Okay, and his attack rate does go up per level. So, could be pretty big. And the feast percentage changes are up by 1.5% per attack per level. All across the board. Interesting. So Lifestealer, now with a higher attack rate, I should be able to go into my rulebook and observe that he has a higher DPS than Shadow Shaman. Let's confirm. Shadow Shaman chilling at 36 DPS. Let's see. This is a brand new Lifestealer, never before seen. And he has 30. Okay, but, you know, obviously, you know, the feast does a bit more. Guys. Okay, I did hear someone spoilerino to be a little bit, and I did hear Brute got a bit of an improvement as well. Okay? So, we're gonna reserve judgment. We're gonna reserve a little bit of judgment until we see how that changed. But at the very least, Feast is looking like a good ability. And for anyone who wants to point out, this is the same dance we did before. I'm just going to do a miniaturized version. If we're going to say Feast improves his DPS past Shadow Shamans, then, I mean, Hex improves Shadow Shamans, like, you know, effective value past Lifestealers. If we want to get into the abilities, that's a whole different thing. I mean, I don't know. Somebody was saying, just load a lobby with a Lifestealer 3-star against, like, something else 3-star and see how much DPS and see if what Lifestealer can beat. Lifestealer is a really interesting hero. I would say Heartless is weird. So when you're evaluating lifesteal, you can't look at, you know, a unit without looking at their tags. At the end of the day, alliances are kind of what makes units strong or weak. Sometimes their ability can be OP enough to overcome that. I can only think of, like, Io as an example to that. They have to have a really, really game-breaking ability to overcome bad alliances. So Brute apparently got changed. We'll get to that in a bit. But, I mean, Heartless, you know, Brute has been holding him back for the last 2 weeks. And Heartless is so weird to evaluate. Because on one hand, it's kind of the most valuable alliance in the game. Holy shit! Holy shit! Okay, I just got spoilered. Shit. On one hand, Heartless is kind of the most valuable alliance in the game. But on the other, you kind of only need a pair of it. So his tag, like, unless he's the first 2 you run, didn't end up doing anything, right? And that's very, very weird to evaluate Heartless. Like, depending on the units in the pool, the pair of Heartless, you only need, like, Pudge plus Shadow Demon, or Pudge plus Drow, or Pudge plus Lich, right? You know, or Abaddon plus Drow if you're in Nice, right? And it's kind of clunky to fit Lifestealer in, so his tags weren't doing him any favors. But now, I mean, we'll do Heartless when we get to that. Okay, we're not going to spoilerino ourselves. We're going to go in order. Magnus got a health buff. I think this hero is pretty flawed. I think he's got pretty weak tags. And I don't think this health buff is going to really change that, in my opinion. The one thing I will say is we have to reserve judgment for the Brute change, because apparently Brute got changed. Meat Hook got a big cooldown nerf. 20-18-15 instead of 10-10-10. That's pretty large. And apparently, I mean, the Heartless pairing going down to 3 armor is a big deal. We're going to talk about that later. We're going to talk about why the Heartless pair was so OP, and whether Heartless will now be a 0 of, a 2 of, or a 4 of. Because that's actually very interesting to think about now that it scales the way it does. But we're going to do that at the end. There's actually a lot to talk about in these patch notes. But for the time being, this is a notable nerf. I want to compare the EHP of Pudge 2 and Axe 2 at the end. So Razor, with its plasma fields, minimum damage changed from 10 to 25. So minimum is basically units that are adjacent to Razor. Maximum damage got doubled. Whoa. So they basically just doubled plasma field damage, huh? Wow. This actually might be like a unit now. That's so crazy. Because ever since Razor got demoted to tier 1, his ability has felt very shit. Doubling him up, I mean, he's not going to be like the best mage all of a sudden, but he actually will probably get a lot of places. Plasma field damage minimum is also useless. It scales 30, 70, 100% damage, as far as I know, at 1, 2, 3 squares from Razor. Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. That's in line with what I've seen as well. So yeah, I mean, at the very least, maximum damage is still going to be quite good. Razor's a weird hero. I mean, before his damage was so weak, you know, sometimes if you're in early mages, you know, you get him to level 2, maybe pair him with a Primordial and put him in front. His ability was dealing so little damage, you don't even care. Bit of a flawed hero. The fact that he's a Primordial and you're usually playing him if you're leveling him to 2, both are going to make him more of a frontliner. But his ability, of course, does nothing when he frontlines, so it's a little strange. And now his ability feels better, so maybe he could be a bit more of a backliner, depending on, like, you know, how your early game is coming together. You could actually move him back and have him, you know, plasma field multiple times a fight. And those early fights could be very powerful. Troll Warlord, Fervor, bonus attack speed. Changed from 15, 20, 25 to 8, 10, 13. Now that's per stack. And max stacks went up. Wow. So if we look proportionally, they're basically having this number and basically doubling this number. Obviously, like, rounding is going to cause the end results to be technically a little different, but not really. It's just like very small percentages, like 1 or 2%. At the end of the day, his Fervor maximum attack speed is still going to be the same, but he's a lot slower to get there. So that brings us to the question, a very interesting question, which is, how does Troll Warlord look now? I had a, let me see if I can pull it up, but I had a Troll Warlord, like, graphic. 1 second. But basically this was Troll Warlords, DPS, and this was kind of meant to compare different items. We can see here, you know, the different data points are for Daedalus, Moonshard, and Mask of Madness at level 1 and level 2 Troll at DPS, scaling per second with Fervor. So basically, I mean, you're just going to see, this is like, you know, per seconds. We see time on the bottom, 2 seconds here, 4 seconds here. And we have the Fervor ramp up is just going to, so basically this chart is just going to be doubled, right? So 4 seconds becomes the new 2 seconds. Not necessarily, not exactly. It'll be a little different from that. And then you're going to see here at the end, it's going to peak at the 12-second mark. instead of the 6-second one. It won't be exactly 12. What'll it be? Maybe like 10? It'll be a lot longer. I wonder if this pushes Daedalus to be better than Moonshard or the other way around. It's a good question. It is a good question. Because Troll is very counterintuitive. The way Fervor works is really strange, right? I don't actually know the answer to that question, whether this would push one to be better than the other. Fervor is getting a bit less attack speed. I think that has to push Moonshard, right? If Fervor is slower to peak, yeah, that has to push Moonshard, for sure. That being said, Daedalus is so much better on a level 1 troll. I suspect, and the math would have to be done, I suspect that even with this push, Daedalus is still better on a level 1 troll. Now, on a level 2 troll warlord, Daedalus and Moonshard have been about the same, with me still, in a lot of situations, going for Daedalus. What I will say about this change, and maybe my logic is a little off, and we haven't done the exact numbers, we'd have to update this. But what I will say about this change is, in the past, level 2 troll, it's like level 1 troll has been Daedalus is better, and level 2 troll has been Daedalus and Moonshard are about the same. And now I would suspect that the level 1 troll Daedalus is still better. Might be wrong about that. But what I'm fairly confident of is level 2 troll would be able to use Moonshard better than Daedalus now. I would be pretty surprised if that wasn't true. There might be like a misstep in my logic there. I think Moonshard is even better since he will take longer to ramp up now. Yeah, it basically does have to be. So yeah, level 2 troll does prefer Moonshard now. It pretty much has to. Okay. So we can continue on. Overall, not a huge change. It's a nerf to troll warlord. I would say this is a noticeable nerf for sure. If we look at, basically his ramp up is just a lot slower, right? The question you guys might be asking is like, how big of a nerf are we talking here, right? And the question, sorry, I know I was gonna finish up, but I forgot to talk about how big of a deal this is exactly. The question is like, how big of a change is this here, right? So this is like, linear scaling top to bottom. So he starts at, let's say, the ramp up for the most part on average is going to be like from 0 seconds to 4 seconds. You're looking at, and we can do an average like across all these different like data points here, but you're looking at an increase of damage of, wow, it's really, really low on these ones. You're looking at an increase of damage that's probably going to look like about from like minimum to maximum fervor. Not actually that much of a DPS bump up. Not actually like a huge one. Like at its peak, you're looking at like 608 to like 800. So at its peak, what is that? A 33% ramp up, and with one of these that, is going to be a lot lower, that's going to be closer to like 20%, maybe even 15%. So on average, like the difference between the 0 and the 4 second is going to be something like 25% DPS. Whereas, now the difference between 0 and 4 is going to be closer to 15, 12% DPS, something lower, right? Something we can say roughly half. So Troll's DPS is going to be down when you incorporate that like 25 DPS into his DPS. His total DPS is probably down, and you kind of have to conjecture a little bit to find this average, because it depends, like, on average, how many seconds per target does he spend attacking, etc. But his total DPS should be dropping, what, something around 10% off of this? 15%? Something like that. It would be noticeable. It would be noticeable. It wouldn't be, like, gigantic, but you will definitely, you will notice it. That's it's on the low end of noticeable, I would say. But if depending on like what they've done with warriors, obviously that's the kind of the real nerf to troll, right? Okay, Viper, Nether Toxin damage got doubled up. So I was looking at Razor and I was like, well, they doubled the damage on Razor, so Razor's actually kind of decent. Viper was really bad. I don't know if doubling this damage is even going to be enough. He poisons a single cell. And now, like, the break on this is less too. it definitely, it feels better, you know. You're going to be doubling damage. You know, I will say it's hard to run him when you're not looking at his tags, but suddenly in something like Knights that might have wanted to run him, I know there's a lot of people that run Knights that literally weren't even running Viper in Knights just because he was that bad, but I mean, honestly, at the very least, I feel like this number bumps him to the point where, like, we can run him in Knights and not get flamed for it. That's fine. I don't know if he'll be played outside of that. It still feels really hard to run him. Viper has root too. It's just that no one ever noticed it. Yeah, I noticed it for the first time there. I was like, wait, that's a root? I was like... Dude, when was the last time anyone ever played this unit, dude? That's crazy. Okay. Force Staff no longer disabled by Break. Helm of Undying was disabled by Break. As before, Break will prevent a unit with Helm from entering the Undying state. Now, in addition, if the unit is still broken after the Helm activates, it will become targetable and killable again. If the unit is broken after Helm activates, it becomes targetable and killable. So it goes to 1 HP, basically. Okay, so that doesn't really change anything. That's like that's not really for balance, that's more for consistency of mechanics. For the most part, Helm of Undying is better. It's not worse, because obviously Break got nerfed up above, so there's going to be less people running Break. Even if Break's interaction with Helm of the Undying isn't necessarily worse, Break is a weaker concept, and you're going to go out of your way for it a bit less. I do think with ANESSIX, and maybe I am mistaken, but it feels pretty hard to pick her like Break talents now. I mean, the entire reason you took it was because of disabling alliances, right? Now that it doesn't disable alliances, Break went from like kind of the most OP thing ever to something that it feels hard to go out of your way for. Helm of Undying still might be worse than Chainmail. I think I would put it worse than Chainmail in these like longer fight styles. Well, now that Chainmail's at 7, Helm is probably back to being better. Now, like Chainmail at 7 and like this Break nerf, I think Helm has to be better than Chainmail. So we had like a week period for a moment there where Chainmail was better than Helm. Didn't last very long. Brute. Okay, so this is a big one. Debuff to enemy attack damage doubled up. 15. Holy shit. 15 to 30. 40 to 70. Oh my god. And damage on debuff being applied also pretty buffed. Damn, dude. Okay, this is pretty crazy. This is pretty crazy. You know, Lifestealer got 4 extra DPS. Magnus got like 400 health. Alright, so this is interesting. All of a sudden, you look at these brutes, and you're like, wow. This can actually be something. So, I can't say necessarily how good I feel like this will be. So, the question becomes, how do you run it? Is it a 2 of or a 4 of builds? And in either case, like, which heroes, right? I can tell you right now, it was, part of the problem with Brute is that it was designed, its scaling was the scaling that you would see in a 4 of build. But its heroes and its size were designed for a 2 of build, right? And I wanna like, you know, talk a little bit more about that. Like, so its scaling is like 6 times from 2 to 4, which is like really, really good scaling. It's all, like almost as good as scaling can get. Whereas like its actual heroes, you really don't want to be running 4 of these heroes. They're very specific heroes. They have like no interlinked tags, and they're going to be basically not. It's going to be hard to find 4 of them that are going to be useful on your endgame board, right? And the heroes haven't changed. Well, the scaling has changed. The scaling, if anything, is a little bit worse, because instead of almost tripling up, it's doing a bit more than doubling, and a bit less than doubling on the damage and debuff being applied. So, my take on this, and I could be mistaken, I think a lot of people are going to get excited and try to run 4 brutes in a lot of stuff. And it's possible that 4 brutes will actually be pretty good. I think it's a little unlikely. I mean, even with these improvements, and they buffed Axe too, I didn't mention that. They buffed Axe too. Even with these improvements, it feels too clunky to run 4 of these units. What I could see is like the pair coming back a bit. I still don't know what's going to be happening with Heartless, and that's going to be definitely a big decider here. We need to figure out like where we feel like Heartless will be as an alliance. But looking at like, you know, Lifestealer plus Doom as like, you know, a late game pair. Maybe you're in an ANESSIX so you can use Doom a little bit better. Or Treant, you know, maybe you're in like Treant IO. I'm not sure on the state of Treant really right now. But if you have one brute for one reason, you can like pair a second one. That feels a bit more runnable. I don't know. To be honest, I'm not sure how I feel about this. It's a huge buff. It's so gigantic of a buff. Like that they literally are basically doubling every single thing that brute does. They're doubling this number, they're almost doubling this number, and they're saying almost doubling. 50 to 80 is a stretch. It's like a 60% increase, but that's a really big increase. And then this one's, you know, it's like a 50% increase. Listen, this is a big buff. It's huge number-wise. These are the 2 things that brute does for you. And yet I still look at brute and it still feels really hard to run these. And again, it's probably because the scaling and the units kind of aren't in agreement. These units say this is a pair alliance. And the scaling still kind of says otherwise. It's hard to fit this in like a main build. So I don't know. Even like how big do the numbers have to be for you to run these? And people will point out that like brute is awkwardly designed. Because, of course, you know, they're tanks, so you're debuffing the DPS of the enemy tanks usually, which is kind of not really doing as much. I might try these out. I kind of suspect it's still going to be hard to run them, which says a lot about how they were before. That being said, you know, maybe that's just me. 70% is actually double effectiveness, as 40 meant the enemies did 60% damage, and 70 meant the enemies do 30% damage. Yeah, that's a good point. You're right, Spectrum. So it is effectively doubling up for the same logic as like how Knight and Elusive damage resistance scales. Okay, when a demon casts, now only allied demons are silenced. It doesn't change anything, right? I guess it doesn't buff or nerf demons. You might say, well, it's a buff to demons because your enemies don't silence you anymore. But, I mean, it's also a nerf to demons because you don't silence the enemy demons anymore, right? It doesn't change anything. So, yeah, demons as an alliance still, it doesn't really make sense. I really want to like demons. I really do. Like, when I looked at the big update demons for the first time, I was like, ooh, that's really cool. Something I really like the idea of in an auto battler is an alliance that has sort of a flexible amount of units, if that makes sense. Like, you know, there's the 2-4-6 alliances, you know, and then there's the 3-6-9 alliances. We don't have 9s anymore in this game, but some games do. You know, and then there's some alliances where it's like singleton, but there is some cool concept in an alliance that scales. If Demon made a little bit more sense, it could have been an alliance that is flexible in, like, it basically filler slots, right? It can be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, every unit you put in kind of gives you a bit more value, and usually there's a sweet spot. I looked at this and I was like, oh, that's really cool, you know? Run it with ANESSIX and get some value out of like 3 or 4 demons, buff up your Terrorblade. But the more I played it, the more I realized it just made no sense at all. Because, like, you're just playing a bunch of units that can't cast spells, and you're basically just doing it for the sake of getting your Terrorblade like a 4-second DPS buff, which is just not enough time to, like, you know, be worth it. I don't know. This alliance still needs to have something happen to it that makes sense. And it's not like they don't know that. So, I mean, I guess they'll figure out something with this later. I don't know. Heartless and Warrior changes. And these are fairly interlinked. Heartless, down 2 armor on the first pair. I'm going to talk about the scaling of this in just a second. And Warrior, down 3. 7 to 20. 6 Warrior armor untouched. 6 Warrior armor untouched. Wait, they didn't really nerf Warriors. 6 Warrior... 20 armor. So Troll is dealing like 10% less DPS. Pudge has to wait like a few extra seconds for the hook. Am I missing something? So there's something you guys are all memeing about this, and I'm not gonna be I'm gonna be honest. Like I'm kind of doing my best to make it a little funny too. But all jokes aside, Warrior buff. So here's something that's important to understand. Here's something that's very, 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 very important to understand about what happens here. It's a Warrior buff because ANESSIX can't break Warriors. You could see that as well. So, a while ago, story time. Several patches ago, I wish I could scroll down far enough to pull up the notes. Several patches ago, they introduced... God, I really want to pull up the notes. Does the version online, the web version, does that have, like, can I scroll down forever? Because I'm about to make a point that I think is actually important for you guys to understand. You can't scroll down forever? Okay, I'll just talk about it. Because if you guys play this game and watch this game, you guys know the patch note in question. So, about 3 months ago, when they were messing with probabilities of tier 4s and tier 5s, that was the time when they accidentally boosted these probabilities a little too much. Do you guys remember this? Epics and legendaries at the time, tier 4s and tier 5s, 5 costs and 4 costs, whatever you want to call them. They got boosted a bit too much to basically just make you want to level up aggressively. And they realized this within a week, and their response to increase it. So basically, the thing to understand... Wait. Is it being linked here? Because I would actually love to be able to pull up a visual. The thing to understand about that change was exactly how they decided to nerf it, right? So think about what happened. What happened was they incentivized leveling too much. They made leveling too strong, okay? And then a week later, they were like, well, no, we made it a little too strong. Let's nerf leveling, okay? Let's nerf leveling. And do you know how they did that? They made level 8 weaker while keeping level 9 the same. And if you guys watch these patch notes videos that I do, you'll have heard me said one specific thing, which is specifically, I looked at that change and I said, no, this is backwards. They buffed leveling. And it's really important to understand that. Because when level 8 is weaker, but level 9 is the same, it just makes people force 9. They did that a bit over 2 months ago now, and this is the change that has led to the so-called good stuff meta we have found ourselves in for about 2 months. Because they tried to nerf something and accidentally buffed it. Right? And keep that in mind. That's very, very important. When you nerf level 8 while keeping 9 the same, it just makes it so you can't even stay at 8 anymore, and you just have to go to 9. Right? Okay. So now, understanding how that works, let's look at this warrior change again. Okay? The same exact logic. Like, look at this. They made 3 warriors weaker while keeping 6 warriors the same. Right? And 6 warriors is, I think, probably less common than 3 these days. But maybe that's about to change. Right? 6 warriors was definitely, like, a more... I think it was more popular before the change. But even after the change, there were a lot of people jamming 6 warriors. right? And it's really, really important to understand that. Because you look at this and... I mean, I like the fact that they're nerfing 3 warriors. I don't understand why 6 has 20 armor still. 6 warriors were bad because of ANESSIX's breaks. Well, yeah, and ANESSIX's breaks being gone means 6 warriors get a bit better. The principle doesn't really apply here. With leveling at some point in the game, you basically have to be at 8, which incentivizes yourself to go to 9. But with warriors, nerfing 3 warriors doesn't buff 6, since it means you're forcing yourself into a weaker position at some point for the same end results. It doesn't apply to the same degree. I agree with that. I don't know if I would say it doesn't apply at all. I mean, the question is, are 3 warriors so good that you still want to run them? Now, you might say the answer to that is no. And maybe the Pudge nerf actually hurts that a lot, right? Because, or sorry, not the Pudge nerf, specifically the Heartless nerf. Now that Heartless, and we still haven't talked about this yet, and I want to talk about this because there's a lot to talk about in this one number change. There's a lot to talk about. That's a big nerf to Heartless. This is a gigantic nerf to Heartless right here. Absolutely massive. And Heartless is a bit weaker. I would say the thing about warriors is, if you ever want to be in scaled, you kind of need to be in 3 warriors, right? The Arc Warden nerf is big for the 6 warriors too. Yes, yeah, for sure. Arc Warden is definitely a big nerf for 6 warriors. I need to actually like go through the DPS of Arc. So wait. I didn't do that. I did like troll effective DPS lowering, but I didn't do like Arc Warden effective DPS lowering. I actually want to go back and do that now. So it's very simple math. He's doing 75% of what his damage was before, right? 75% of what his damage was before. That's very easy math because half of him does half less damage, right? So he's minus 25% DPS. But when you're factoring in the item, let's look at Maelstrom Arc Warden. And this is kind of the easiest math you can possibly do. This is really, really, really easy math because he has 1 attack per second, right? You don't even have to do math. It's just counting at that point. His DPS went from 320 to 240. But when you factor in Maelstrom, and Maelstrom is also really, really easy math. Wow, look at that. Maelstrom is 400 damage on a 25% proc. Now, this is magic, and his damage is physical, and we can get to the difference of what that means in a bit. But on average, it's not going to be that huge of a difference. So Maelstrom is giving him effective 200 DPS because he gets 2 attacks per second on the 100 DPS on the 25% 400 damage proc rate, right? So you look at Arc Warden. Let's imagine an Arc Warden level 2 with a Maelstrom. How much DPS is he actually lowered by then, right? That's kind of a big question. So 75% of his base, and his base was what? 320 to 240. So Arc Warden level 2 with a Maelstrom is 520, and that gets lowered by 80. 520 down to 440. 520 divided by 440. You get 85% DPS, basically. So with the Maelstrom, it's a 15% DPS nerf. And the one thing to understand is his physical damage is worth more than magical, probably on average. The physical gets reduced by armor, whereas the magical will be a bit more damage, but the physical is more focused, and focus damage matters more than anything else, right? Basically. So yeah, that's the end result. An Arc Warden level 2 of the Maelstrom is dealing 85% of his old damage. It's definitely a bigger nerf than something like Troll Warlord got. And like I said, 85% damage is an 85% value. The value is probably a little lower than that. It's probably closer to like 80%, and that's if you have a Maelstrom. Well, you know, some other items get a bit worse, like stuff like Daedalus get a bit worse, you know? So, Arc Warden definitely feels that nerf, for sure. Right, that's very, very important. Okay, so getting back to Warriors and Heartless. 3 Warriors is kind of never going to be dead. I mean, this is, at the end of the day, it's a pretty simple change, pretty obvious change. It's like, it's the chainmail treatment that people were kind of expecting. So you have 3 less armor on your 3 warriors. And now, with ANESSIX losing the ability to break alliances, it kind of seems like 6 warriors will be really popular, right? I mean, the biggest reason people ran 3 warriors over 6 was because 6 was a lot more vulnerable to break. And every single person on the high ladder, I'm not even exaggerating. Okay, I am a little bit. So when I say every single person, I really mean like 99% of people. That one is not an exaggeration. Every single person, 99% of people were running an ANESSIX with like just taking the break talents. And because of that, people started cutting down on 6 warrior and going into 3. And then I think like when 3 warrior was more popular, you know, the amount of people running the ANESSIX break trait maybe went down like an extra % or something. I don't know. It would have been really minor. But the point is 3 warrior got worse. Not too much worse. But it did get worse. You look at the armor increase. Armor scales almost linearly. Positive armor. So for the most part, like this isn't going to be absolutely perfect math, but it's going to be very, very close. You're going to see the value being cut down by about 30%, 10 to 7. Like it'll be off by like 2% or 3% or something like that. Whereas 6 warriors is very good. Six warriors is very good. They lost Arc Warden and DPS and Troll as well. And 6 warriors does need that DPS source. They are worse. They're not going to be in every build in the lobby. Warriors. 6 mages got much better with warriors getting weaker, I think. Yeah, I think so as well. I don't know. It's hard to evaluate warriors. I mean, at the end of the day, it feels really hard to break the pattern, right? Because it's happened before that they've like nerfed warriors and the 20 armor just like holds. They lost some forms of DPS. Arguably, most importantly out of those, not Troll or Arc Warden, but the Pudge linking Heartless pair. Heartless pair now gets cut. Gets cut big. Gets cut huge. The problem with warriors is that you could force it and get away with it, but now it will be more risky to force it. What about it specifically? I do think, I mean, the level value is down from what it was before. For sure. You run 3 warriors, 6 warriors, 3 mages, or 3 mage now? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't feel like 6 warriors is gonna really be able to be bad off of this. Like, 3 warriors will still be solid. It might not be in like every comp ever, but it still will be pretty solid. And 6 feels pretty powerful. I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I feel like in another like couple of weeks at least, I mean at the latest, they'll have to look at 6 warriors, right? I feel like reducing this number without reducing this one just doesn't make enough sense. And then we get to Heartless, because this is the big question. And I need to think about this in order to answer this question. Heartless. So the big question at the end of the day, and we're going to have to answer some little questions to get to this big question. But the big question is, how many Heartlesses do you run now? Because there's kind of 3 options. 0, 2, and 4. And before...
Hi Swim. I recently quit my job to become a game developer. So I have this new idea for a game, I think you'll like it. Okay, well, there is no actual game. I'm just going to release 1 GB of text as patch notes and you can just theorycraft for enjoyment smile.
That's kind of all you need, right? I'm not even joking, dude. Gameplay, who even likes playing games, dude? I love patch notes. Okay, so before, Heartless is like 0, 2, 4, right? Let's say, like, even if 6 is an option, it feels like the diminishing returns are too high. Okay, let's talk about Heartless and how it existed for a minute, and why it was always a pair. And that's important, because it was always a pair. When this patch hit, they added more Heartlesses to the game.
Moist.
So you could run 4
Since
Heartless.
Break no longer affects alliances, can this become a brawny forcing stream once again? Gotchi, gotchi, gotchi. Gotchi. Gotchi-gasm.
Okay, no, seriously though, seriously. Guys, I'm trying to make a point. I'm trying to use math and shit, and you guys are fucking gatchying. Okay. So, the Heartless armor debuff goes... No. So, before I talk about this, I have to talk about the point I was making before. So, Heartless kind of has to be a pair. The reason was, it was overpowered in terms of accessibility. You had just a couple good units. Historically, Necrophos, although now that he's lost the Warlock tag, he feels a lot less good. Pudge. And even like these days, like you see Drow fitting into some things. Shadow Demon has the ability to fit into a lot of stuff. You're always going to find like 2 Heartlesses that are good. And it's OP. So you kind of can't run 0. There's some builds that can run 0, but it's hard. And you didn't want to run 4. Why didn't you want to run 4 if it's so OP? And the answer to that is pretty simple. And that's because Heartless is basically one of the worst scaling alliances in the game. The reason for that is very straightforward. It's a support alliance, right? So you look at the normal alliance, any average main comp alliance. Let's look at Brute, for example, you know, just because it's new, it's changed, is what we're talking about. And the scaling of this, I've said before, was like 6 times scaling. What do I mean by that? Well, you're redoubling in a few ways, right? Old Brute, not new Brute. You're almost tripling up the value on the percentage. You're doubling the value over here. And most importantly, you're doubling the units that are picking up the buff that you're doubling over here, right? That's really, really important to understand, right? When you look at something really straightforward, like let's say Warriors, now it's even more scaling, right? So you have 3 Warriors, that's 3 units with 7 armor versus 6 units with 20 armor is going to be, 120 instead of 20, right? So that's, again, a sextuple up. That's a 6 times modifier. That's kind of what Browning was working with in the first place. And you might say, well, armor is not the metric. The metric is EHP. Maybe it's closer to like 5.5 times or maybe like 5 times. Yeah. The math is like not super rigorous, but you get what I'm saying about how scaling works. And then you have this concept of a support alliance, which doesn't double up. It doesn't quadruple up. The average alliance quadruples up in this game. That's just average. You look at elusive, bam, simple. It's like when you go from 3 to 6, you double the units. You double the units that are picking up this buff, and you double the efficacy of the buff. It's a quadruple up. That's standard. That's just the standard main comp alliance is going to quadruple up. Okay? Support alliances double up. That's kind of what they do. You look at like Scaled, you look at Heartless, the new Human is another, like, the Human is even less than double up. It only goes from 4 to 7, right? So the scaling is a lot worse. And that's really, really important to understand. And you might say, well, it scales less good, but, it still scales well enough to run. And the problem with that is that usually you're best off abusing the main comp of something that scales better and using support on the side, basically, right? The thing to understand is the opportunity cost is too high. Because when you run 4 Heartless, it's eating into your ability to get those quadruple ups on those other, like, main comp alliances. Like, you have less units to just play with. So it feels a lot less good, right? And this has been the reason because A, it's been OP, B, it's a support alliance, and C, there's just enough good units in it to make you want to run 2. These have been the reasons that for the past, like, as long as I can remember, Heartless has been not a 0 of and not a 4 of. It's been a 2 of. You just run 2 in everything. And there's some builds that run 0, sure. There's a couple builds that run 0. You got me. Like, mages are weird shit, whatever. But the point is, it's basically 2 in everything. And now you look at new Heartless, and this throws everything out of whack. Because suddenly, new Heartless, they nerfed the first tier without nerfing the others. And I love that they've done this, actually. I do like these number tweaks. Because now suddenly, 0 Heartless becomes more appealing. 4 Heartless becomes more appealing. I don't know. And again, the question we have to answer is, okay, the main question to answer is, do you run 0, 2, or 4? And then the sub-questions are, in what builds, in what situations? And we're going to have to delve into some math here. Because I actually don't know. 4 Heartless was already appealing. Maybe. I wasn't the biggest fan of 4 Heartless personally, but some people were running it. I think that 4, when it's a good jail for 4, is probably going to be a lot more used here. Because they're effectively halving the value. It doesn't look like much, right? It's this number going to this number. But you have to understand, this is effectively halving the value. Close to halving it. Of the minus armor. Minus armor scales... it's always hard to evaluate minus armor because it depends on how much armor is in the metagame, right? Minus armor is a lot better when there's not a lot of armor in the metagame. You might intuitively feel like minus armor counters armor, and it's actually the other way around. Armor counters minus armor. So the less warriors in the metagame, the better for Heartless and being able to run something like 4 of them. 2 Heartless, the thing is, still feels like something you can run in a lot of situations. It's still a Blightstone for every unit on the enemy team permanently, right? Very late, you'd go back to 2 often, though, instead of 4. Yeah, maybe. It definitely does depend. So, let's go to the minus armor stuff and how that's going to scale here. So for that, we might want to bring up the, the classic. Sorry, 1 second. The Info Hub spreadsheet. And what do we have here? So we can go through, minus armor, damage amp. Yo, Valerian, welcome to the 1/8 gay club, buddy. Okay. So let's pull some stuff up. So we have minus armor damage amp chart. So armor of target, starting at, again, it's so hard to determine an average. The unit starts at 5, and then there's warriors, and then there's chainmail. But let's say, pre-Heartless, let's put an average unit at, let's just say 5 for now. Obviously, the average is going to be higher than that, but, the base unit starts at 5. Average is going to be closer to 8, but we can then just, tweak it a little bit after we get that calculation. So damage effect with 5 armor, we can see at 5 is a 30% DPS increase. And with 3, it's only 16%. So you see, this is what we're talking about its value getting halved. Pretty crazy. You really are only getting half value. And even if 10's your average, 24 to 13. Again, half. Your pair of Heartless is doing literally half as much as it used to. Half. That is so crazy, right? And now we look at the minus 10 effect. Minus 10 armor over here on the F column. And let's take a look at these numbers again. So minus 5 is what the pair used to be. Minus 3 is what the pair is now. And minus 10 is what the quad has always been. So we look at, let's say 5 armor. It doesn't matter, actually, whether you're at 5 armor or 10. But you look at either one, and we get a 60% damage increase compared to what it is now, which is half of what it used to be. This is let's average 5 and 10, shall we, between those two. This is 4 times as much value, right? And again, we're looking at the scaling. So it's 4 times scaling. Now that's precisely correct. And scaling is so important. Scaling is what determines whether something is a main comp or whether something is a support. And how much sense does it make to do certain things? And suddenly we come to the conclusion that, looking at these numbers now that it got halved, it's no longer linear scaling. It's no longer doubling up. It got halved at tier 1 and kept the same at tier 2. Now it's quadrupling up. This is normal scaling. This is, there's obviously some variance. Not everything quadruples up from 2 to 4, but this is normal scaling. Some people were running 4 Heartless before, especially in comps that did more physical damage. Suddenly 4 Heartless seems a lot more applicable. I think at the end of the day, the answer is probably all 3. The answer is some builds will run 0 Heartless, some builds will run 2, and some builds will run 4. At the end of the day, Heartless is still kind of OP. It's really good. like, I sort of worry that 4 might be a little too rampant. If 4 wasn't good before, 4 still isn't good now. Like, so I mean, that's not true, right? What do you mean? 4 Heartless has got much better, right? Like, that's really, really important to understand, because it's the same exact thing I was talking about before when I was talking about bumping 8 down in value while keeping 9 the same, or the 6 warriors and 3 warriors. Like, the thing to understand is, when you're evaluating something like that, it's not about the flat value that it has, right? It's about the value increase that you're getting past the initial, right? So you look at 6 warrior, this isn't 720. Those aren't the numbers you're looking at. The numbers you're looking at are 713, right? 3 warriors gives you 7, and 6 gives you 13 more. That's why 6 warriors is kind of better than it was before, right? Assuming that 3 warriors are still something you're often going to want to be in, which is not always true, but it often is, right? That's important to understand. This isn't always going to be true, but depending on where your build is, you will have to take that plus 13, right? And it's the same with Heartless, right? They did buff 4 Heartless. That's important to understand. This isn't... It says the same numbers here. It says 10, but it's not the same real number,
charts.
right?
I can send you some more charts if you want charts. I've got like 10 you haven't even seen yet, fam.
Oh, what do you have, Lope, then? Anything I can, like, pull up for this patch note review? Because, I mean, I wouldn't mind some jail stuff. You mentioned they didn't really change jail. I guess they haven't done anything like that yet. I know they said they were looking into it. I guess that's maybe for next week. But anyway, I was saying, like, it's important to note, they did buff 4 Heartless. This number says 10, but this number never said 10. This number used to say 5. Now it says 7. That's the amount you get beyond what you're already in. You're already in the pair of Heartless, and now suddenly, if you're in the pair of Heartless, the 4 is better. But it's less necessary to be in the pair of Heartless in the first place, because now it's 3. So some builds are going to run 0. And that's kind of why you see some builds running 0 now, and some builds running 4 now. 4 Heartless got better, and 0 Heartless also got better, which is... It is almost paradoxical. It's kind of weird to think about in that way, that 0 Heartless and 4 Heartless can both get better at the same time, but they can. Like, both of them can go up in play rate off of this exact change, right? Just because 2 Heartless creates a gap in the market, 2 Heartless being gone, rather, creates a larger gap in the market for, you know, if you're in a build that has, like, let's say, a Pudge that has to commit, and, you know, you have an ANESSIX, so Shadow Demon is just, like, solid anyway, like, you can think about going to 4, right? And if you don't want to go out of your way for Heartless, you kind of no longer have to. The question is, what's the state of 2 Heartless? And the answer is, it will still be run. There will still be builds that run 2 Heartless, for sure. Just because 2 is so accessible. It's still... You're getting a lot less for it. I would say, in general, it will probably be less common than 0 or 4. And by the way, when I say 0, I don't necessarily mean 0. I also might mean 1. 1 and 0 are the same thing. Tier 0 Heartless. Because sometimes you have, like, 1 Heartless, but you don't have room to link it to something. And before, you would make room. That's what Heartless was. You have the unlinked Heartless, you make room to link it. Now, at 3 armor, I don't think you have to do that anymore. I think you can. I think it depends on where you're at. But suddenly, you don't have to link the Heartless that you already have on your board. Right? I think what people are saying is that if 60% damage increase wasn't worth running 4 Heartless then, it may not still be worth running 4 of those units now. But that's wrong. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that's wrong. It's not 60%. If you're already in 2 Heartless, they buffed 4 Heartless. The numbers are more than they were before. They're not less. They're not the same. They're more. Depending on what situation you're looking at. Like, if you're going from 0 to 4, they're the same. But you're never going from 0 to 4. The question is 1 to 4 or 2 to 4, right? Like, how many Heartless you start with and how many Heartless you're adding. And if you're starting with, like, 2, which you often are, it is more. That this is doing more than before, right? Instead of being the... Instead of being the 5, it's now the 7. So 4 Heartless is better than before. This Lopton, I changed my name for the tourney. I'm the jail guy. I can send my latest numbers on jail if you want to talk about Scrappy's getting fucked scientifically. Probably another time. But yeah, this is effectively what we're looking at here. So that's like, I'm trying to think like if I missed anything out. I'll mess around with Hobgen. I might try messing around with Brutes. I suspect Brute Pair is better than Brute Quad still, personally, but could be wrong about that. It does look like it's going to be really hard for 6 Warriors to not be good. 6 Warrior, like 4 Heartless is not even bad. Arc Warden definitely feels harder to run, for sure. Like, you kind of need an item to run Arc Warden now, I would say. Like, if you get a level 2 Arc Warden early, it's still like... The thing is, you still kind of have to play for it, because you might get a good item for it on like 25 or 30, you know? But it does feel a lot more ignorable, especially with the opportunity cost being a constant. The value of tags might be increasing with Heartless being a 4F. Like, for example, Warriors might just go 4 Heartless now. Like, 6 Warrior, 4 Heartless could be fine. You're not going to be able to link too much between Warrior and Heartless, though. Obviously, Pudge is the connector, but you can't really, like... Yeah, you can't really link anything between those, right? So, I'll have to mess around with what builds there. Troll losing, like, something like 10% DPS hurts a bit. This Razor buff was actually pretty big for mages, I think. Unironically. Like, he's kind of a must-have hero. So, you know... You kind of didn't like the fact that you had to play such a shitty hero. And now he's actually good, right? The thing is, when they take a bad hero and they buff him, usually I look at that and I'm like, this hero's bad, he wasn't seeing play, so any buff... Okay, so like, the thing to understand is like, when it comes to changes like that, it's like, okay, look at my hands. This is the level where a hero becomes playable. So if a hero gets buffed from here, let's call this level A, B, and C, okay? So it gets buffed from A to C, but the real buff is only the difference between B and C, right? Because it can't, like, below playability doesn't matter, right? If that makes sense. So if a hero is unplayable and it gets doubled up in value and it goes to here, it's only getting buffed by, like, this much, right? C minus B. That's all it's getting buffed by, which is not as big as the buff looks, because the buff looks like C minus A, right? But it's really C minus B. Now, Razor doesn't... He's such a weak hero, he should fall into that description, but he doesn't. Because you had to run him in 6 mages in either the early game, or even in a lot of scenarios, just because he was your 6 mage, depending on the jail, right? So you look at this, and this is a true C minus A level buff, right? This is the unwatered, like, unadulterated version of this double up. You're getting the full value here. And that's kind of crazy. Can you explain this using your feet? But yeah, so mages definitely feel a bit better, you know. It's a little bit weaker to splash the 3 warrior now, I guess. So mages might be a little less counterable. I mean, you can still run 6 warriors. 6 warriors feel fine. Lifestealer is still a piece of garbage. But, you know, I mean, 4 Heartless is kind of the biggest buff to Lifestealer at the end of the day. Now 4 Heartless is better. Suddenly you're going to be a lot more... You're going to be seeing more Lifestealers because of that. His tag got more valuable, even if his stats increased by a bit. Not necessarily enough, in my opinion, but that doesn't matter if his tag is more valuable. That's fine. His brute tag is more valuable too. I don't necessarily know if it's more valuable by enough, but at the very least it's parable later. I mean, I think that's okay. 34 DPS, Keck W. Guys, no longer are we Keck Wing at Lifestealer's 34 DPS. This is a changed man. Lifestealer has 38. Lifestealer has 30. Lifestealer has 38 DPS now, okay? This is a DPS powerhouse, all right? You just... all right, I can't even say it without laughing. Okay, but I think that's the end of it. You know, for the most part, that's my impression. Pudge, I mean, he's still a warrior Heartless. Both tags got nerfed. Hook got nerfed. Pudge definitely feels worse because of that. He's still a huge tanker. And then I think the final thing is we were going to go through Pudge and Axe EHP values. Now, I wasn't counting Pudge's warrior tag before, and Axe kind of lost that tag anyway. So, Pudge at the 5,005 armor, naturally. 5,005 armor versus Axe at the 3,703 and 10 armor. Unfortunately, so we can go ahead and math this out. So where is the? Let me see if I can pull this up. So, yeah, let's pull up a different page in the info hub here, and we can see survivability increase with 5, 10, etc. Armor of target 0. So you start at 0, get a 5 armor for a 30% increase. Pretty simple math. 30% of 50 is... should be really easy. $1,500? How did that take me like 10 seconds? Okay, alright. So Pudge's EHP is 6,500. And Axe has the 60% increased EHP on his, what is it, 3,703. 60% increase EHP on 3,703. It's gonna be, you know, I mean, I can, what would you call that? 1850. So that's about 2,200 extra EHP. So he ends up at like 59 compared to 65. Actually, not that big of a difference. I thought it might be still a bigger difference. So Pudge at 65, Axe at 59. Basically, Pudge has an extra 600 or so, which at Axe's amount puts Pudge at about a 10% EHP markup over Axe. Not that bad. Not that bad. I was thinking it would be like 15%. So yeah, I mean, Axe is actually pretty close to Pudge. And of course, Pudge really has 12 armor because of Warrior. Obviously, when you actually add the Warrior tag in, that's where a lot of the value comes from. I'm just talking like even before that. You might say, well, but Axe has the Brawny, Brute, or whatever this is called, and the Brute will damage debuff the attackers onto Axe, and he'll have even more I don't know. I mean, when you evaluate alliances, it gets obviously a lot more wonky. But it's not bad, actually. The level 2 Axe is actually approaching Pudge in terms of EHP. And who knows, maybe now, like, level 1 pair of Brutes might actually be more EHP than 3 Warriors. Okay, it's not. But, I mean, if their DPS is melee and Axe is wailing on him, I don't know. It's just their DPS is never melee. Unfortunate. Unfortunate. So I think that's about it. I don't think there's too much more else we have to do here. That pretty much covers it. I don't know. I mean, for the most part, it steps in the right direction. I don't know. It is steps in the right direction. It feels... I don't know, man. I've been feeling a little, like, bad about this game lately. It feels like stuff is so out of balance, it's going to take some bigger stuff than this. I really hope I'm wrong about that. I want to like this game, but I mean, there is a reason I've been taking a 5-day break from it. And I'll go back to playing it tomorrow. Like, I'll stream it, and I'll test out some of the new stuff. And, you know, I do like that leveling to 9 is a bit worse than now. But it feels like these are kind of, like, small steps. Like, I mean, we've been in a pretty extreme state where the past, like, few months we've had an extremely dominant one-sided meta that people are publicly now just reacting to, I guess. Even though everybody's been complaining about it. And it's like, I mean, I don't see... A lot of these number tweaks don't feel big enough to escape that, you know? Jail made it a mess. It's hard to see a way forward. I think the number one thing to happen is a jail algorithm tweak, and that will probably happen next week. Jail definitely is a concept that's going to make good stuff better. And, I mean, without, like, changing good stuff, that's a big mistake. I still like jail. I think that people that don't like jail are kind of, not really seeing the bigger picture. I mean, jail is still a good concept. The problem is the balancing of the game. The problem is good stuff is just too good, right? And obviously jail contributes to that. That's always going to happen. That was always going to happen. That's built into the concept of jail. But good stuff can just be weaker without jail being, like, you know, removed. Because I've seen a lot of people just, like, outcrying, like, jail should be removed or it's negative for the game and something like that, which is kind of nonsense. I mean, jail is good. They did say jail was getting changed next week. Yeah, they publicly confirmed that jail is getting changed next week. Jail's an amazing concept. It's just a bad algorithm. The idea is fine. Yeah, exactly. So, I think, you know, that'll be something to look forward to next week. I'm not sure how much of this game I'll be playing. I mean, I've got a tournament to play into tomorrow. I'll play it for at least like a few days. I don't know. Then there's like Runeterra next week, which I'll play for a few days when that's out as well. And hopefully at that point, like they'll have next week's patch. I mean, I do think these patches are in the right direction. It just feels like it's gonna be another week or two before things are like properly balanced at this rate. I don't know. We'll see. And that at this point, like, this view is a little pessimistic. You know, I don't mind the design of the game at this point. Right now, it's mostly the balance. And the last, like, I don't know. I've been feeling bad about the meta for a couple months. And I was hoping the big patch would change stuff, or at least, like, not even immediately change stuff, but they'd be responding to things a bit faster. And it feels like these changes are just very gradual and watered down. But hopefully I'm wrong. I really hope so. Like, I'll play it for the next few days, and we'll see. We'll see exactly, like, the state of the meta and how things are looking. All right, guys. That's going to be it for me. And I'll see you guys next time. And cut. That's the YouTube cut. That's the YouTube. It's over. And then the stream cut, that comes after.